Good morning, and thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are proudly broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We have a lot to get to this morning. As I mentioned on yesterday's program, yesterday and today, I have blocked off this time together with you. No M.A. Neal Financial Services segment of the program, no interviews until tomorrow. Now, tomorrow, we'll have Allison Hunt. She is the deputy mayor of Corning. She's also running for Steuben County Legislature. So if you have any questions for her, please contact me. Also, just in general, on the topics we'll be discussing this morning, because we have a lot of them to get to. Obviously, a lot of talk, discussions about the upcoming Republican debate. We know that the former president, Donald Trump, will not be participating in that debate. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. We'll also discuss President Biden's trip to Maui. That'll be here in just a little bit. Let's start, though, with a New York story. Shall we? All right, here we go. New York loses $1 trillion in Wall Street business as firms flee the city. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. We have high taxes, obviously crime, which is not being taken seriously by Albany, is a major factor in this as well. Nearly 160 Wall Street firms have moved their headquarters out of New York, but we continue down the same path. And this is one of the things that we've talked about, why elections have consequences. If you keep voting in the same, mindset, then nothing's going to change. People are going to leave. What would keep these Wall Street firms in New York? You may say the prestige. Well, eventually, the cost of that prestige becomes too much to bear. So 160 Wall Street firms have moved their headquarters out of New York since the end of 2019. That's taking nearly $1 trillion, that's with a T, in assets under management with them. That's according to data from 17,000 companies that was compiled by Bloomberg. And now here's some of the reasons. Looking to dodge rampant crime. Again, public safety, a major issue. The only reason, and this came up last week, Governor Hochul wants to address public safety issues is because she saw that it led to Republicans taking over the House majority, and she did not like that. It wasn't about public safety. It wasn't about your safety or mine. It was about the political aspect to it. So that's why now she is doing the PR to try to convince you it's not as bad as you think it is. Bail reform, all of these, we could point to so many that we've talked about at the end of the session with, Assemblyman Chris Friend, Palmisano, O'Mara. We've talked about it with everyone that will listen. The idea that we're coddling criminals and tying the hands of our law enforcement. But again, looking to dodge rampant crime, stiff taxes, and an increasingly exorbitant cost of living. 158 fed-up financial firms, representing a whopping $993 billion in assets, have packed up and left the Big Apple, taking thousands of high-paid employees with them. That's what the data shows. Now, I'm not going to get into all the wonkiness of each individual one or some of the major ones, but this is something that it's not even difficult to say that we predicted it. We've talked about it for so long with so many guests that you can't just keep going to that quote-unquote cash cow. And then on top of that, throw the crime rate at them as well and all of the negatives, and just expect them to be happy and live in New York for the right to call themselves a New York firm. So unfortunately, this will only get worse. It goes right in line with what we talked about with residents fleeing. And this is not something I say in celebration. I wish people would stay. We've talked about how great the state is, and it just needs a lot of major changes. And we're not, as we saw at the last session in Albany. Those changes aren't being made. If anything, we're making matters worse in the state. and causing more people. What was that poll that we had a few weeks, maybe months ago now, that most residents, polling shows, of New York State actually have basically a 5-year plan of when they will move or attempt to move. And many people are just leaving. How many family members, friends do you know that have left because of the cost of living, now public safety with things like bail reform? So again, I don't say it in celebration or with enjoyment. It's just we have to look at the facts. If we're going to turn things around, we have to look at the facts. Also, I see kind of in line with this, 82% of New Yorkers believe that the recent influx of migrants is a serious problem. 82% of New Yorkers. 54% consider it very serious. So 82 overall consider it a serious problem. 54 specifically said it's very serious. They also say migrants resettling in New York over the last 20 years has been a burden. That's at 46, and not a benefit at 32%. I know can be a little bit difficult to read those numbers, to grasp them and not see them on the screen. But that was coming from Siena College, and the article was just a little bit too much to put up on the screen. One last thing about New York. I know I'm running late. One last thing, and then we're going to get into the national scene. I don't know why I found this so funny this morning. According to gold and silver retailer SD Bullion, New York ranks as the most bougie of all states. Bougie is slang for bourgeoisie. I knew I was going to screw that up. Has often used as an insult, meaning someone with a lot of money, less so now with taxes, but anyway, with a lot of money but no taste. I did not realize that. So New York ranks number 1 in the most bougie of all states in the union. Well, finally we get a number 1 that's not as bad as, highest taxes or least amount of freedoms. At least this one you can kind of understand or accept, I suppose. All right, let's take that break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Again, weigh in at any time that you see the number on the bottom of the screen as well. We'll be back right after this quick commercial break. Stay with us. I didn't look at my time. I hope I didn't just cough right in the mic as we were coming back on, but I believe I did. Hey, welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host, Frank Acom. Let's talk about President Biden's trip to Maui. There has been a lot of criticism. And by the way, I will be talking about the presidential debate here in just on the Republican side in just a little bit. But, he originally responded no comment when asked about the fires. Yesterday, he made a weird, I don't know how it's a joke, but he said it in a joking way that you guys catch the boots out here. That's a hot ground, man. Commenting on the heat of the ground. Yes. Well, anyway. So angry Maui residents were slamming Biden, many holding signs saying no comment as his motorcade went through. Some yelling, "Go home, Joe." As he drove towards downtown, Biden passed signs that said no comment. Actions speak louder than words. Other sayings that I cannot repeat on the air. One local resident, Dennis Mullen, said, "Where has the president been?" The New York Post had, I think, a really hard-hitting thought on this, or theory on this, that because Hawaii is basically a guaranteed lock for Democrats, that there just wasn't that concern, almost taking for granted the people in Hawaii. And we've seen it in the past from all political parties taking a quote-unquote voting block and taking it for granted. There's also criticism of the way it was set up. He had his, the full White House treatment. You had the podium with the seal. You had that little table holding his one bottle of water. It looked very, I think someone called him like Marie Antoinette or something like that. One actually former Hawaiian legislator, Kanila Ing, went to social media and saying, "I campaign for you. Now when I lose dozens of my friends, family, and neighbors, this," meaning this is the response, even on MSNBC, of all places, which normally, I don't think this is telling tales out of school, but I think it is very pro-Joe Biden, very favorable to Joe Biden. But Chris Jansing compared the response of President Biden to that of former President George W. Bush and Katrina. President Biden heads to Hawaii, said Jansing, where he will meet with traumatized residents, even as his personal response to the tragedy, as well as the administration's as a whole, has come under some pretty heavy criticism. After the president addressed the wildfires back on August the 10th, it was another 5 days before he ever mentioned it again. That's despite being asked about the fires at least twice while vacationing, and that's another bad optic, the vacationing aspect of this, in Delaware. He refused to comment both times. I forgot it was twice. Wow. On the grounds in Hawaii, frustration over what's been described as a painstakingly slow response and recovery has evolved into anger at the situation. I mentioned that from the residents there. But anger at the situation, the system, and even the president himself. And then, I don't want to give you the whole quote and read it because it's quite lengthy, but he said, after Katrina, President Bush infamously praised the FEMA director, saying, "Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. And I wonder if you think a president can come back from what's perceived as a tone-deaf response." You almost answer your own question there, because if you're still bringing up Bush and Katrina, did he overcome it? I don't know. I mean, I think the media overall will be selective in how they handle this, because the optics were so bad really from beginning to end before you even set foot there in Maui. So will they cover it with maybe the coverage that they gave of George W. Bush during Katrina? That is yet to be seen. What I have seen so far is I'd say no. They're not covering in that way, but they have been critical. We have one more piece on this that we're going to talk about Kamala Harris. Then we're going to get into the debate. I do have to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. A couple quick comments that I received, as always. Feel free to contact us anytime. And as you can see on the bottom of your screen, by the little hand, is the phone number too, if I don't have the contact information up throughout the whole program. And by the way, speaking of that, we did get a virtual wave. People text us virtual waves. So there you go. There's one. And one of the comments is, and we were talking about New York earlier, in my opinion, New York needs old-fashioned conservative rule. Originally a Binghamton native, I escaped to this area because life simply feels better here. And we do love this area. That's why I bring up these type of reports, not to gloat or something about the bad policy coming out of Albany. Not that at all. Just to highlight the fact that we need to change that policy if we want to keep people, businesses in our state and continue, or to thrive, I should say. Maybe not continue, but to thrive. Okay, back to the president's trip to Maui. A lot of people have been critical of making it about himself. You know, the president has this reputation for empathy. Sometimes it comes off really kind of fake in a way to some. And that's what the New York Post predicted, actually. It's kind of funny, and I guess I keep forgetting to put stuff up on the screen. But he talked about a minor fire that he had in his house and claims that he knows what it feels like in a way. And that, to me, fell on my ears. Very strange, very weird. Because if you look at the history of what happened, it's one of these kind of Biden-esque stories that have grown and grown and grown to where it's really not even any kind of representation of what actually happened. And the New York Post last week actually predicted this. He said, when President, and this is the editorial board, when President Biden announced his trip to Maui, the Post asked this question. I might have brought it up on the show, as a matter of fact. How much do you want to bet he will act inappropriately to family members and try to make it all about himself? If anyone took that bet, it's time to pay up. Even by Joe's low standards, writes the editorial board, this trip was a debacle. Our tone-deaf commander-in-chief takes off from the Lake Tahoe home of a Democrat donor, does a flyby of the island, then turns around, goes back on vacation, mission accomplished. The Biden team set up a presidential lectern that I mentioned earlier in the middle of the rubble, which is bad enough. But they also brought along a tiny little table to set his water on. If you see that, the optics of it, just from a PR standpoint, did not look good. Guess we should be grateful they didn't bring a teleprompter, which is why he stared at his speech the entire time. Then Biden decided the best way to show Hawaii that he cares is to, again, this is from the Post editorial board, I'd love to hear your opinion, is to lie. Again, he recounted the harrowing moment firefighters had to, quote, run into the flames, end quote, of his home to save his wife, Jill. This never happened. For years, Biden has turned a minor kitchen blaze into the Great Chicago Fire, even after the Delaware department he praises said it was, and I quote, insignificant. So to bring that out, and the media does a great job with this. They'll spin it as, again, this is him showing empathy, being able to relate. They do the same thing when he fabricates the story that his son, Bo, died in Iraq. The Washington Post said it just this week. Quote, Biden has long been seen as uniquely adept at leading with empathy and tragedies like this one. But as the Post editorial board says, this isn't empathy, this is ego, and it was insulting. Now, there's been a lot of talk. Will Biden run for re-election? If I'm making predictions, I hate making predictions. I think he will, but it's kind of fun to see people's reaction because yesterday Jason Chaffetz had a piece that he believes he will not run for re-election. And that's why we've seen so very little from his campaign and doing things that would normally be just a no-brainer when it comes to campaigning for president. I think that's a good point. But, they start throwing around Gavin Newsom and names like that. Well, Kamala Harris, Politico did a 5-page article on this, and it was actually kind of fascinating trying to reimagine the vice president or giving her a second chance at a first impression, if you will. And they do a very nice job of making it a fluff piece at the beginning. This is kind of what they did with Hillary, too, if you recall. She looks stiff or she doesn't look that likable. But, boy, behind the scenes, she's the best. You just love her. You'd want to have a beer with her. They've done that time and time again. That's what they attempt to do here with the vice president. Backstage, as she prepares for a not-so-intimate fireside chat about gun safety in front of hundreds of people, Kamala Harris is unscripted and seemingly at ease. No notes or teleprompters in sight. She's comfortable, offering condolences and counsel to those who've lost loved ones to gun violence, who stream in wearing red shirts and blazoned with Moms Demand Action or, the various groups. She holds their hands and looks into their eyes. Quote, we speak their names, she whispers to one woman. She gently reassures a man clearly anxious about where to stand in the photo line. All eyes are on her, but that's been true of Harris for a while now. And the view has not often been kind. Her tenure as Joe Biden's number 2 has not been known for relaxed and warm moments like those in Chicago. Instead, Harris's team has largely been marked by stilted performances, at public events, at odds with the uninhibited interrogator she was known as in the Senate. They fueled whispers about whether she'll be a drag on the re-election ticket as a 2024 race heats up. And that's another piece that we had yesterday, or a few days ago, which it wasn't so much will Harris run instead of Biden, it was can they maneuver something where she becomes Feinstein's replacement to kind of save face for everybody and then put somebody like maybe a Gavin Newsom who the media tells us is really likable. I can't remember who said it, but I thought it was a really good point that Gavin Newsom looks like who you would hire if you needed an actor to play kind of that, what's the word I want to look for without being too rude? Well, that typical kind of jerk on Wall Street. I can't remember which one of our guests said that. I think they used a different word. But anyway, so put somebody else in there more likable, but then everybody gets to save face. So it wasn't even about her running instead of Joe. It was, can she be replaced on the ticket to make it maybe a more popular ticket? So, and then they talk about how she's trying to basically get a second impression, to redo her first impression. You could have followed me around in Iowa ahead of 2020. You would have seen the same thing 4 years ago. It's always who I've been. So I can't get into people's heads about why they characterize things as being one way or another. It's not as though I've just found myself. I've always been here and never went away. Well, isn't it because of the rockiness of her speeches? It's become at least maybe in conservative circles online, kind of a regular feature of her, what they call word salads, these very odd, you can't even say structured sentences. It starts one place and never really gets to a point and just ends. But there's that, but there's also the things that she was tasked with, like the border crisis. Nothing has been done. So, Politico and others can do this type of, hey, let's give her a second chance kind of thing, and never mind what you see with your eyes. She's really kind of nice and fun to be around behind the scenes. But again, we're just judging based on what we see, and it's very much the same mindset that they have with Hillary. Just never mind what you've seen for the last however many years that she's been in the limelight. Trust us. If you knew her, you love her. So I don't know why that, and the reason I said this piece was fascinating is I don't know what the end game is here. Is it that they want her to stay on the ticket? They want her to replace Feinstein? They want her to replace Joe? Or if it's just maybe they see the writing on the wall that she will be on the 2024 ticket, and they're just trying to do the best they can to help kind of revive her image. I don't know. Weigh in on it. How about that? I'll leave it up to you. But we got to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Thank you again for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So tomorrow is the big day, the GOP presidential debate. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of discussion whether the former president would participate in the debate. He signaled just the other day that he would not, actually hinting towards the fact he may not do any of the debates. We're going to talk about that and what some of the reaction has been to that in just a moment. Before, here's kind of the who, what, when, where, and why that you need to know. So 8 candidates have qualified. Now, if you're confused how that system works, the RNC, it requires candidates to draw at least 40,000 individual donors and register at least 1% support in 3 national polls or in 2 national and 2 early state polls that met a certain criteria set forth by the RNC. The candidates were also required, and this was a real sticking point for the former president, to sign a pledge saying that they would support whoever the primary winner is. Now Trump said at the time there's people that he just felt that he could not support. So he would not sign it. But I don't think he intended to do the debates anyway, just looking at some of the things he said in the past. But let's take a look at who's in it, because I'll be honest. When you look at that picture on the screen, I'm not, I maybe could name all of them. Well, it's interesting. Because a lot of times you forget that someone even declared, and we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so who's in? We know Ron DeSantis has made the cut. Kind of a new rising star, if you will, Vivek Ramaswamy and Liz Peek from Fox News, which we may get to here in just a little bit. She says, get excited, which is not, if I'm Ramaswamy, I'm going to be saying, hey, come on. Don't set the bar too high. But her thought is you might be surprised how much you like Ramaswamy. And I know he put out the 10 Commandments that we mentioned last week for his campaign, or what he knows to be the truth, these 10 things. And he put a much longer piece together. You can find it at the New York Post is where I saw it. Not just listing off the commandments like I did on Friday, but explaining his reasoning there. So if you have a chance, I would just either search his name or find it at the New York Post. So we'll continue. But he is kind of getting a lot of traction. Some polls have him now at second over DeSantis. So it will be interesting because for many of us, we've seen clips, we've read some things about him, but this will be the first time in maybe long form that we'll get to see what Ramaswamy is all about. But I will highlight, as you are well aware, though it may be a little bit better without Trump there will be everybody's going to try to be gunning for number one. They're going to try to really have a great night. So there's going to be a lot of interruptions. There's going to be a lot of talking over each other. I could see some candidates trying to pull really a Donald Trump and go to the, what's the word I want to look for, name calling, or you know what I mean, that kind of direction, that kind of narrative. We know Chris Christie will be very focused on Trump, and I would assume most of these candidates will be focused on Trump, which I think is unfortunate. I would love to see where they all stand and what their plan for the country is. But again, you realize they've got to make inroads against the front runner, so they're going to have to try to do everything they can. So even though Trump will not be there, I am sure he will be a main focus of the debate. Okay, sorry, got on a tangent there. Mike Pence will also be there. Nikki Haley. Tim Scott, he had a little bit of a bump not that long ago, but now he seems to flattened out again. I think you'll be impressed with Tim Scott. I say that if you're not overly familiar with him. I really enjoyed, number one, his positive message, but also I interviewed him a few years back when he had a book out, and I think he's a very personable guy, and someone that you can find yourself liking as you watch more of him. So I'm going to be watching him very closely during the debate. Chris Christie, again, Christie's job is to, well, there's a reason why that mega donor to the Democrats has maxed out his donations to both Biden and Christie. Christie's job there is to be what, like they used to call in football, the hatchet man, right? To go out and go after the front runner. That's why we saw in Governor DeSantis's playbook for how it's being recommended, I should say, by consultants, he handled the debate, and it was, in a way, defend Trump and go after Christie, and defend Trump against Christie's attack, but to continue to go after Christie. So Christie will be there to, spoiler's not the right word, but try to, go after the former president. And I really do hope we focus as Republicans more on talking about Biden and the current administration and the economic problems we're dealing with, inflation, et cetera. I hope we do focus on that, because I think that's something as conservatives, they need to do a better job of getting out that part of the message, not just focus on Trump, which I know is the nature of the beast. You're going to have to. But I really hope that we see some positive things or ideas for what they would do if they were president. I'll continue. Doug Burgum. This is one that I kind of forgot was in there, and that's not a jab at him whatsoever. I know, I'm almost sure he's the one that you could donate any amount, and he would send you a $25 gift card. I don't know if that ever proved to be legal or whatever happened there. I'm not suggesting it was illegal, but a lot of people thought, well, that seems really iffy, because the idea is you could send $1 and he would send you a $25 gift certificate. And the reasoning behind that is so that he could get to that 40,000 individual donor number so he could be in this debate. But he's a North Carolina governor. Yeah, there we go. Who attracted donors with a gift card scheme. $20 in exchange for $1 donations. He has described himself as the least known contender on the debate stage. Wow. Okay, I wouldn't describe myself as that. Maybe be a little more confident. He said Sunday on NBC, even if it is true, he said Sunday on NBC that he'll have succeeded in the debate, quote, if we get a chance to explain who we are, what we're about, and why we are running. And Asa Hutchinson, the former Arkansas governor, he will be there as well. He is also, like Christie, set out to go after Trump. That's his main goal, is to attempt anyway to bring down the former president. He has said in the past that he is confident that Donald Trump will not be the nominee. Okay, who's skipping? We know that. Donald Trump. He's not going to do it. He actually, this is why, I don't know if you read this, it's kind of a breaking story either earlier this morning or late last night, that they're not going to allow any of Trump's spin people into the room. Because, after the debate, they have these interviews with people that spin the narrative, for their candidate. They're not going to let Trump's people in. And there's kind of this talk of love-hate relationship with Fox. And it doesn't help, if he did want to have his spin people in there, it doesn't help that he did agree to be on Tucker's, I don't know what you call it, podcast or whatever you call that he's doing. He agreed to be on there at the same time as the debate. That's not going to make Fox News happy either. So who's out, just in case you're wondering if there's others still attempting to run for president? You have Perry Johnson. He's a Michigan businessman. He fell short of the polling requirements despite a series of unusual schemes to try to get that $40,000 donation. They sold a I Stand With Tucker t-shirt defending the former Fox News host. It also offered tickets to a concert by country duo Big and Rich to anyone who donated, and it handed out $10 gas cards to anyone willing to make a $1 contribution. So that was really a common theme. So people could have taken advantage of that. Yeah, that's $30, at least $20 from, I almost said, what's his face, from the other guy, and then $10 from Perry Johnson. Francis Suarez, he's the Miami mayor. He was looked at as being someone that's just going to attack DeSantis, or be at least critical of DeSantis. But again, these are people that aren't going to make the debate. But just in case you're curious who's still running for president as a Republican, Will Hurd, the former Texas congressman, another outspoken Trump critic in the race, and Ryan Binkley, the little-known Texas pastor and entrepreneur, got a spot in the Iowa GOP Lincoln Dinner speaking lineup. And finally, Larry Elder, the conservative talk radio host, had a great show. I don't know if he's doing the show now, or he may not be able to, but he was not able to make it to the debate with the certain qualifications that the RNC demands. Let's take a break. Running just a little bit late. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We do have another short break coming up in just a moment, but I wanted to mention quickly, because we're talking about the GOP debate, I forgot to mention that it will broadcast tomorrow on Fox News at 9 p.m. That's tomorrow, 9 p.m. So they asked White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary, that's a long name there, Olivia Dalton, Principal Deputy Press Secretary. They asked, do you believe the president will watch the GOP debate? Dalton replied, I don't know. I sure hope not. For his sake, but I don't know. For his sake. Well, I wonder what that means. He'll get too worked up, or is it a dig at Republicans that there's nothing to see there? I'm confused by that. Now, again, before we go to a break, I just wanted to highlight the fact, and we're going to talk more about the debate, but we do have to take this short break. Here's my contact information while I highlight a few quick housekeeping things here on the program. So today we do not have an MA Neal Financial Services section of our program. We always thank MA Neal Financial Services, of course. We had so much to catch up on these last 2 days, so I purposely did not book a guest for these 2 days. But the rest of the week we are jam-packed, starting tomorrow with Allison Hunt. She is the deputy mayor here in Corning, but she's also running for Steuben County Legislature. So if you have any questions for her, there's 2 ways that you can contact me, and I will ask those on the air, most likely, if we have an opportunity. And she'll be on tomorrow right around 7:15, so do not miss that. Let's take that break, and then we will be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay right there. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So I mentioned Liz Peek has a piece out this morning on Fox News. It's an opinion piece, of course, saying that Ramaswamy could surprise everyone at the first Republican debate. Saying Republican presidential hopeful Nikki Haley is going after Vivek Ramaswamy. She'll have plenty of company on Wednesday night. Ramaswamy is surging in the polls, making him, like Ron DeSantis, an obvious target. Obviously, a lot will be on Trump, but you've Kamala Harris, the same thing happened last go around when she had that dig at Biden, remember, during the debate, and it helped her a lot, calling him a racist, essentially. And so she went up in the polls. She did not realize then once you're up in the polls, the same thing's going to happen to you. And everyone turned on her. And, of course, she never made it to the ultimate primaries. She dropped out before. But I'll continue. We didn't need that history lesson. My guess, this again, Liz Peek, my guess, Ramaswamy will hold his own and then some. Why? Because he's super smart and is talking common sense. And boy, does this country need a big dose of common sense right now. And we know he's a political novice. But as she said, and I thought this was interesting, he was virtually unknown 6 months ago. And some would say he's still relatively unknown. That's why the debate's going to be very interesting for him. He does sometimes traffic, this is according to Liz Peek, in controversial statements, and that Nikki Haley has jumped on that. But it seems to say that he seems to be saying what a lot of Americans are thinking or talking about. As he recently told Fox Business's Neil Cavuto, and I like this line, "I'd rather lose this race and speak the truth at every step than to win by saying what I'm supposed to." So that's a good statement to make. And of course, I mentioned Vivek Ramaswamy has released his 10 truths for the 2024 campaign. It's now in article form if you want to find it at the New York Post to go into more explanation. We read that list to you. It is 10. It takes a little time. I did read that to you, I believe, on Friday's show. But you can find out more at the New York Post. But one last thing about this piece by Liz Peek. Ramaswamy wants to rattle the establishment. Judging by the hit pieces coming from the New York Times and other usual suspects, he's enjoying some success. Yeah, they're getting nervous. But his secret weapon may be that he is unflappable. Kind of a nice guy, right? Faced recently with aggressive questions at the Iowa State Fair by someone describing herself as a pansexual, Ramaswamy delivered an impressive masterclass on what he calls a tyranny of the minority. Yeah, that if you didn't see that clip, you should search for it. It went viral. Well, as much as political stuff like that can go viral. All the while celebrating that he and she could engage in a civil discussion because of the protections of this great country. They even shook hands at the end. Now, the road to the nomination is long and full of potholes, especially for a first-time candidate. Tomorrow's debate will be one of many tests for all the contenders. Ramaswamy could emerge a real force in this race. The stakes could not be higher. So, in my opinion, Liz Peek putting a very high bar on that. You don't ever want that high bar being set. You kind of want to be counted out almost and then have a great performance. But I thought that was interesting because I think together on this program are essentially learning more about Ramaswamy little by little. So there's a lot of things I'll be looking forward to in the debate tomorrow, but that is definitely one of them, is seeing Ramaswamy, seeing Tim Scott, seeing some of these people that we follow relatively closely, but have this national stage and have longer, hopefully, time to talk. Let's take another break. Then we will be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Please stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Received a couple comments during the break and during our last little bit of discussion. In the debate, because we were talking about the debate if you're just joining us, sincerity, passion, common sense, and charisma wins elections. Bashing, targeting, and condemning a candidate only turns voters off. Finally, Vivek Ramaswamy has all three. He could be the Republican version of Obama. That's interesting. Now, if you recall, Obama was relatively unknown. He had not even had a full term as senator yet when we saw the rising star there and what happened in that race. So that's an interesting comparison. Thank you very much for that. Again, that's why we'll be watching Ramaswamy closely. 73% of GOP voters in a survey wanted or said that Trump should participate in the first primary debate. That's a CBS News YouGov poll, which is interesting because the former President Trump has been bringing up this poll to highlight his numbers, meaning the positive numbers in the race and being the front runner. But also they found at the CBS News YouGov poll that 73% of GOP voters in this survey say that Trump should participate in the first primary debate. I mean, I would have liked to see him there. I think we all would have. But I also understand the idea of why he's not there. You do have a lot to lose in that scenario because you're going to have almost everybody going after him. And his numbers are so high, even though there's some spin out there today trying to say, well, it's not that high, faltering at only 35% above everybody else, that kind of thing. And even those are different polls and maybe more obscure polls. But what does he stand to gain if he goes after a Christie or someone that's polling at 1%? That's the thought. But the person polling at 1%, like a Mike Pence or whoever, they only have room to grow. if they chip away something at Trump and they get to 2-3%, hopefully, and get some type of momentum, that would be their ultimate goal. You know this. I'm just reiterating for those that maybe didn't hear Trump's reasoning. Now, the big news this morning, late yesterday, is that Fox News is restricting Trump and his team, not Trump, he wouldn't have been there, but Trump's team, access to the debate spin room. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Wrap things up here. I know we went fast this morning. We covered a lot. I'm having a great time. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. So Fox News has restricted Trump's team from the access to the debate spin room. Trump's senior aides had indicated that they would be in the spin room. And now, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's where campaigns tout their candidate and rip their foes. But now they can only enter if they are invited by a media organization. So they maybe could maneuver some things there. It didn't help because they keep saying it's a love-hate relationship with Fox News. But, Trump had that interview with Tucker scheduled for the same time. Now, again, I mentioned these very quickly because we're wrapping up the show. Legendary Iowa caucus pollsters put DeSantis in the ballgame despite sizable Trump lead. Quote, closer than it may first seem. Again, another, never mind what you see with your eyes. Anyway, that's just in Iowa. And Rich Lowry from the New York Post says the GOP race isn't over yet. Just look at Iowa. See, that's what they'll tout. The latest Fox News poll had a more modest 30-point Trump lead. 37-point, modest 37-point lead. Leads to the headline that says GOP race isn't over yet. Just look at Iowa. Interesting. MSNBC's Joy Reid says Trump is the Jim Jones to the MAGA cult, because she said MAGA is a cult. Trump is the Jim Jones to their Kool-Aid crew. Now, did you know that it wasn't actually Kool-Aid at Jonestown? It was Flavor Aid. Just a side note there. I interviewed one of the survivors quite a few years ago, and I thought that was really interesting. I don't know why I decided to bring that up. Okay, we got to get through some other things. Adam Kissinger, kind of an embarrassment. Let's face it. He says that Trump, he keeps saying this, Trump is scared to death of Chris Christie. That's why he doesn't want to do the debates. He's a coward. He's scared to death of Chris Christie because I think Chris Christie is going to wipe the floor with him. And I think that's what he's afraid of. Well, there's always a first for something, I suppose. And New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu has vowed to help narrow the GOP field in an attempt to get more support for candidates that could actually beat Trump. He's making it his effort to help defeat Trump. Trump, as you know, plans to turn himself in on Thursday. He received or agreed to, I guess maybe the word, a $200,000 bond and other release conditions. So that'll be Thursday, something we'll be talking about a lot. That is it for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to everybody who joined us. We had a great time. Went fast, so much to cover, and I'm so glad that you could be a part of it. I hope that you'll tune in tomorrow morning starting at 7. Allison Hunt, Corning Deputy Mayor, will be our guest. That's right around 7:10, so start watching right at 7 tomorrow morning right here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Have a great day, everyone.